The day my boss asked me to become her husband, the city was drowning in sunlight, and I was standing outside her glass office with a termination letter trembling in my hand. I thought she was about to fire me. I thought my life was over. But when Seraphina Voss looked up from behind her polished desk, her eyes red like she had not slept in days, she said the words that changed everything: "I need a husband for 1 year, and I'll pay you enough to save your mother's life." Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change a broken life, if you believe second chances can come from the most unexpected places, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need hope. My name is Kairo Wren, and until that morning, I was just the quiet assistant manager at Voss and Vale, a luxury hotel chain where people like me carried other people's luggage, fixed other people's problems, and smiled through our own storms. I had 2 shirts good enough for work, rent I could barely pay, and a mother in a hospital bed waiting for a surgery we could not afford. Every day, I wore confidence like a borrowed coat, but underneath, fear was eating me alive. Then came Seraphina, the youngest CEO in the company's history, a woman people called cold, impossible, heartless, and untouchable. She moved through the hotel like winter in heels, beautiful and distant, leaving silence behind her wherever she went. I had worked under her for 3 years, and in all that time, she had never asked about my life. She knew numbers, contracts, deadlines, and reputations. She did not know my mother's laugh, or the way hospital corridors smelled at 3 a.m., or how a grown man could break quietly in a stairwell after seeing another medical bill. At least, I thought she did not know. But that morning, she slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a contract. 1 year of marriage. Public appearances. Separate bedrooms. No romance. No expectations. In return, my mother's surgery would be paid for, my debts cleared, and at the end of 12 months, I would walk away with enough money to start over. I should have said no. A man with pride should have stood up and walked out. But pride does not pay hospital bills. Pride does not hold your mother's hand when she whispers that she is tired of being a burden. So I signed. My hand shook so badly that the pen scratched the paper. Seraphina watched me with an expression I could not understand, something between relief and guilt. She explained that her late father's will required her to be married for 1 full year before she could fully inherit controlling shares of the company. If she failed, her uncle, Malrik Voss, would take over, sell the hotels, fire thousands of employees, and destroy everything her father built. She did not want love. She wanted protection. And I, desperate and ordinary, became her shield. Our wedding happened 3 weeks later in a garden glowing under noon light. It was a daytime ceremony because Seraphina said evening weddings felt too romantic, and romance was not part of the agreement. The sky was pale blue, roses climbed white arches, and strangers smiled at us as if we were living a fairy tale. I stood in a borrowed suit while cameras flashed and society guests whispered behind champagne glasses. Seraphina walked toward me in a simple ivory dress, not dramatic, not glittering, but somehow brighter than everything around her. For one brief second, when sunlight touched her face, she looked less like a CEO and more like a woman trying not to fall apart. When the officiant told us to exchange vows, our words were clean and practiced. But when Seraphina placed the ring on my finger, her hand was cold. I squeezed it gently, not for the cameras, not for the contract, but because no one should feel alone on their wedding day, fake or not. Her eyes lifted to mine, surprised, and in that moment something small and dangerous passed between us. Not love. Not yet. Maybe recognition. Maybe 2 wounded people realizing they were both pretending to be stronger than they were. Life inside her mansion was stranger than any dream. The house was enormous, filled with marble floors, tall windows, and rooms that looked untouched by laughter. My bedroom was on the opposite side of the hall from hers, exactly as the contract required. We ate breakfast together for appearances when staff were nearby, attended charity lunches, business events, and hotel openings, smiling like newlyweds while living like polite strangers. At first, Seraphina gave instructions more than conversations. Stand closer. Smile less nervously. Do not mention the contract. Hold my hand when reporters approach. I obeyed because every payment meant my mother had another chance to live. But walls crack in small ways. One afternoon, I found Seraphina in the kitchen trying to make tea and failing terribly. She had burned toast, spilled milk, and stared at the kettle like it had betrayed her. I laughed before I could stop myself. She turned sharply, but instead of firing back, she looked embarrassed. That was the first time I saw her blush. I made the tea for both of us, and we drank it at the kitchen island while sunlight spread across the floor. She told me she had grown up in boarding schools, that servants always prepared everything, that after her mother died, her father loved her by building a company and forgot to teach her how to live inside a home. Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened around the cup. After that, small moments began collecting between us. I learned she hated thunder but pretended not to. She learned I hummed old songs when I was worried. I discovered she donated quietly to children's hospitals without letting the press know. She discovered I visited my mother every evening and lied about how tired I was. Sometimes she came with me, sitting silently beside my mother's bed in expensive clothes that looked out of place under hospital lights. My mother, who could read souls better than faces, once held Seraphina's hand and said she looked like someone who had forgotten she deserved tenderness. Seraphina did not speak for a long time after that. The first real test came at a company gala, held in the grand ballroom of our flagship hotel on a bright afternoon that turned golden through the glass ceiling. Kairo Voss arrived with a smile full of poison. He congratulated us loudly, then leaned close and said he wondered how much a man like me cost. I felt the words hit exactly where he aimed them. Before I could answer, Seraphina stepped between us and took my arm. She told him I was worth more than any man who measured people by money. The room went quiet. Kairo laughed, but I saw anger flash in his eyes. That day, for the first time, Seraphina defended me not because the contract demanded it, but because she meant it. Still, fake things have real consequences. Rumors began spreading that our marriage was staged. Paparazzi followed us. Kairo planted stories about my poverty, my mother's illness, my debts. Headlines called me a hired husband, a gold digger, a desperate employee who married above his station. I told myself I did not care, but shame has a way of finding every locked door in a man's heart. One morning, I saw Seraphina reading an article about me. I expected distance, maybe regret. Instead, she folded the paper carefully and said we would face it together. Together. The word stayed with me all day. But the closer we became, the more dangerous the lie felt. One rainy night, though the story had begun in daylight, the storm outside shook the windows hard enough to wake me. I found Seraphina sitting on the staircase in a robe, pale and trembling. She confessed that thunder reminded her of the night her mother died in a car accident, the same night her father stopped speaking softly. I sat beside her until morning, saying very little, just offering the kind of presents money cannot buy. When daylight finally returned, her head had fallen against my shoulder. I did not move for 2 hours because I was afraid of breaking the peace she had found. By the 6th month, our fake marriage had routines that felt painfully real. She waited for me before dinner. I brought her coffee before meetings. We learned each other's silences. Sometimes, across crowded rooms, our eyes found each other like home. And yet neither of us dared name it. The contract was always there, invisible but heavy. 1 year. No romance. Walk away. I reminded myself constantly that Seraphina had paid me. That everything beautiful between us had grown in soil poisoned by desperation. How could love be real when it began with a signature and a price? Then my mother's surgery day arrived. The hospital windows were full of morning light, and my heart beat like a fist against my ribs. Seraphina cancelled 3 meetings and stayed beside me the entire time. For 7 hours, she sat in the waiting room with me, not as my boss, not as my fake wife, but as the only person keeping me from falling apart. When the surgeon finally came out and said my mother would live, I broke. I cried in front of everyone. Seraphina wrapped her arms around me, and I held her like she was the answer to a prayer I had been too afraid to speak. That embrace changed something. Afterward, neither of us could pretend as easily. But happiness frightened Seraphina. The next week, she became distant. She buried herself in work, spoke to me formally, and stopped coming to the hospital. I thought I had imagined everything. I thought maybe kindness had made me foolish. Finally, one afternoon in the garden where we had married, I asked her if she regretted choosing me. She looked at the flowers, sunlight caught in her hair, and said she regretted needing me before she knew me. Then she walked away before I could answer. The final month arrived with the cruelty of a countdown. Lawyers prepared the divorce papers in advance. The public believed we were celebrating our first anniversary, while inside the mansion, we moved like ghosts. I began packing slowly, folding the life I had borrowed into boxes. Seraphina watched from doorways but never stopped me. I wanted her to ask me to stay. She wanted me to stay without being asked. Pride, fear, and old wounds stood between us like locked gates. On the last day of the contract, Malric made his final move. He called a press conference, claiming he had proof our marriage was fraudulent. If the board believed him, Seraphina could lose everything. The conference was held in the hotel courtyard under sharp midday sun. Reporters gathered like vultures. Malric revealed bank transfers, contract fragments, private documents. Gasps moved through the crowd. Seraphina stood still, her face pale but unbroken. I saw the world preparing to devour her, and in that moment I understood love is not a feeling you hide safely in your chest. Love is the moment you step forward even when it costs you everything. I took the microphone. I told the truth. I said yes, our marriage began as an arrangement. Yes, money changed hands. Yes, I married her to save my mother. The crowd erupted, but I kept going. I said what Malric could never understand was that people can enter your life through broken doors and still become home. I told them Seraphina Voss was not cold, she was a woman who had been taught that love always leaves, so she built walls high enough to survive the leaving. I told them she paid for my mother's surgery, saved my family, protected her employees, and never once asked to be thanked. And then, with every camera pointed at me, I turned to her and said I had signed a contract to be her husband for 1 year, but somewhere between hospital corridors, burned toast, silent breakfasts, and storms on the staircase, I had become her husband in my heart. Seraphina cried then. Not delicately, not beautifully for the cameras, but honestly, like someone whose soul had finally put down a weight. She took the microphone from my hand and confessed that she had spent her whole life believing love had to be earned through perfection. Then she looked at me and said I had loved her most when she was least impressive, most afraid, and most human. She tore the divorce papers in front of everyone. The courtyard went silent. Then my mother, still weak but smiling from a wheelchair near the front, began clapping. One by one, the employees joined. Then the guests. Then even some reporters lowered their cameras because not everything sacred should be hunted. Malric lost the board support that week. The company stayed in Seraphina's hands, but something bigger changed. The mansion became a home. Curtains opened. Music returned. Staff laughed without fear. Seraphina learned to cook one meal badly and proudly, and I ate it like it was a feast. We renewed our vows in the same garden, again in daylight, but this time there were no contracts, no hidden clauses, no escape dates. My mother placed the rings in our hands, and Seraphina whispered that the first wedding had saved her company, but the second saved her life. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that love can grow in the most unexpected places and that kindness can heal what pride tries to hide, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Special request, comment, kindness deserves a second chance, if you believe love is proven by actions, not perfect beginnings. Years later, people still asked us when our marriage became real. Seraphina always smiled and said it happened the moment I squeezed her hand at our fake wedding. I always disagreed. I said it happened in the hospital, when she stayed beside me without needing the world to know. But the truth is, love did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, in cups of tea, in shared silence, in courage during storms, in two broken people choosing not to run. My boss paid me to be her husband for 1 year, but life gave us something no money could buy. It gave us a marriage born from need, tested by truth, and made real by love.